Hi, good day everyone. So our lesson for this video would be about our Unit 3 in your module, which is about the advancement of art, the development of art, and art styles across time. So basically in this lesson, we are going to study the different art movements that existed through time and the different artworks that existed or emerged during each prominent civilization, okay? Especially in the West, okay? Because we are going to have art in Asia in a different discussion, okay? So for this one, we're going to focus on the Western side or the European side, okay? So now let's start. But before we begin discussing about different artworks that existed in each civilization, we just have to parang insert this discussion, which would be about reading the image, okay? So how can we read the image? Okay, so let's have this. Okay, so in order for us to read the image, so we begin with the basic premise that there are two interrelated aspects in the study of art. Okay, so we have to undergo these two in order for us to read and understand the image or the artwork. Okay, so number one, art has its specificity. That is, its particular language has to do with the mediums, techniques, and visual elements of art. This is what constitutes art as a particular human activity different from others. Okay, so basically, each artwork consists of mediums, techniques, and of course, the visual elements that we have already discussed in the midterms part. Okay, so yun. Kaya siya iba dun sa mga ibang activity ng mga ibang species, ganyan. So, even though maganda tignan minsan yung mga nagagawa ng ibang species like yung mga nests, right? Yung sa mga birds, they can construct their own homes, right? What else? Mga huni din ng ibon. So makikita natin, 'di ba? Yung mga animals, meron din naman silang mga artwork na nagagawa. Pero paano naiiba yung artwork ng humans versus their artworks? Okay, the artworks of nature, okay? Because as humans, we can manipulate our medium, we can invent our own techniques, and as well as we can experiment with the elements of art that we can use in order to make our artworks more beautiful. Okay, so we can explore, in short. Okay, so we can explore art to make it more beautiful and to develop it more. And then number two, art is historically situated and shaped by social, economical, and or economic and political forces. So meaning art has its influence on social, economic, and political forces. So vice versa. So these three can also affect art, and art can affect these three also. Okay, so both these aspects need to be taken into account so as to be able to fully understand and appreciate art. So before we can fully understand and appreciate art, so these are the two things that we need to bear in mind. Okay, so next. So how can we read the image? So we have three steps actually, or three levels on how are we going to read the image or understand the image. Or yung image na ine-explain natin dito is yung nabubuo sa visual art. Okay? Yung nabubuong image or pattern or yung facade mismo ng visual art. Ano yung nabubuo doon? Okay? So how can we understand it? How can we read it, so to say? Okay? So we have reading the basic semiotic plane, reading the iconic plane, and then lastly, we have reading the contextual plane. Okay? So before we begin there, let us first understand what is semiotic. Okay, so this one is a topic which is somewhat being discussed most of the time in languages. Okay, but actually semiotics are everywhere. Okay, so ano ba yung semiotics? So semiotics is dealing with signs. Okay, dealing with signs and symbols. So ayan, semiotics is a study of signs or symbols. Okay, so a sign consists of a signifier or a material or physical aspect, and it's signified, which is a non-material aspect as concept or value. Meaning, yung, di ba may nakita kayong sign? Okay? Halimbawa, may karatula. So, that is a sign. Okay? So, ano yung two parts nun? The signifier is the sign or the symbol. Okay? So, the material or the physical aspect, kung ano yung nakikita ninyo. The signified, yun yung nakaugnay na meaning or interpretation doon sa mismong signifier. Okay? So, say for example, we have color red. Okay, your color red is your signifier. Okay? So, meaning, siya yung sign or symbol. So, yun yung signifier. Ano yung signified? Ano yung mga meaning that we can associate to the color red? Okay, so we can associate like color of love, pwede rin, kulay red, or pwede naman sa kulay red ay danger, sa red ay emergency, red, anger. Okay, so those things that you associate to the color red, those are your signified. Okay? So, yung signifier, again, is yung mismong sign or material. Okay? So, in the physical aspect. And then, yung mga meaning na pwede nating i-associate sa kanya or yung mga possible meanings niya, yun yung tinatawag natin na signified. Say, for example, the color red is our signifier. What could be the signified? So, color red probably means stop. Okay, aside from color of love, color of anger, or danger, so pwede nating i-associate, it could also mean stop. So in this sense, color red is your signifier and it's signified it's stop. Okay, so yun yung signified niya, stop. Okay, so now if we are going to put it in another context, kasi we all know if it's put like this, okay, so it means stop. But if we're going to put it in this context, so stop pa rin ba yung ibig sabihin nito? Siyempre, hindi na. Nagbago na kasi yung context niya. So, in this context, it means what? Emergency or danger. Okay? Or step aside, ganyan. So, emergency, yun nga, emergency or danger. So, meaning, a single sign or a single signifier can have different signify depending on the context. Okay? So, yun yung pinag-aaralan natin pagdating sa semiotics. Now, if you're going to analyze an artwork, syempre, you are going to look for signs so that you could have a signified, so that you could understand or derive meaning from the things that you can see in the artwork. Okay? So, starting with understanding first what is the basic semiotic plane. So, when you are at this level, it's gonna include the visual elements and how they are used. So, again, you in the basic semiotic plane, sa number A or number A sa letter A, okay? So, basic semiotic plane, you just have first to look for the things, or you just have to look for the signifier pala rather. Okay? So, ano yung mga hanapin natin at this level? So, you're gonna look for lines, value, color, texture, shape, composition, and space, or movement. So, yan yung mga hahanapin nyo muna. Wala pa tayo sa level na i-interpret natin sila. Hahanapin nyo pa lang yung mga yan. Okay? So, you have to identify what is the choice of medium, what is the technique used. Okay? So, yon. Yun pa lang yung mga hanapin natin, and what is the format of work. So, halimbawa, portrait ba siya? Landscape ba siya? So, anong klaseng installed ba siya? Or portable ba siya? Pwede siya maalis-alis? So, ano yung format ng work? So, ito pa lang yung mga hahanapin natin pag basic semiotic plane. Ngayon, pag pumunta na tayo sa iconic plane, so this has to do with the particular features, aspects, and qualities of the image, which are the signifiers. Okay? So, for this one, ang hahanapin nyo na dito is yung mga possible signifiers natin. Okay? So, you are going to look for icons, so to say. So, ano yung mga hanapin natin at this level? So, it's gonna include, number one, the choice of the subject which may bear social and political implications. So, ano yung mga parte dito sa painting na to or sa visual art na to na pwedeng maging signifier or sign na pwede nating i-connect to social or political aspect. Okay? So, what else? Positioning of the figure or figures. So, bakit kailangan nating tignan yung positioning? Kasi sometimes, di ba, kapag mas elevated yung isang element, halimbawa, yung isang tao dun sa painting, mas mataas siya over everybody else, it could mean what? It could entail hierarchy. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, yung mismong placing nila or yung positioning nila, it could be a signifier. And the signified would be what? Hierarchy. Okay? So, number three, gaze of the subject. The gaze also can entail something. It could signify something. Okay? So, number four, cropping of the figure or figures. And then lastly, the relationship of the figures to one another. So, magkakalayo ba sila? Magkakadikit ba sila? Ano ba yung pinapakita nila? Okay, so based on these 5 points na pwede niyong hanapin, you could deduce meaning. Okay? Now, the last plane would be, ay, letter C na pala to dapat, okay? So, the last would be the contextual plane, okay? So, dito, sa contextual plane, you are now going to apply those things na nakita ninyo, yung mga signifier ninyo. Now, you are going to apply the signified based on the context. So, ano ba yung context ng painting? Okay? So, or ng visual art? Ano yung context niya? So, ano yung pwede kayang makuha nating meaning from the arrangement? Okay? Kasi kanina dun sa B, dun sa iconic plane, tinitignan natin yung mga position, and then what else? Tinitignan natin yung gaze, ganyan. So, tinitignan natin yung relationships nila to one another. Now, you are going to apply it into context para malaman nyo kung ano yung possible meaning na sinasabi niya. Okay? So, ayun nga. So, ganun po tayo magbabasa ng mga artwork. Kasi minsan nahihirapan tayo. Halimbawa, kukunin tayo na judge ng visual art competition or na poster making competition. So, hindi natin alam kung ano yung, hindi natin alam kung ano yung nandun or hindi natin maintindihan kung ano yung sinasabi ng poster or ng slogan or kung ano man yung visual art na yun. Hindi natin maintindihan. Halimbawa, nasa isang exhibit tayo, but cannot understand kung ano yung sinasabi ng painting na yon. Okay? So, para maintindihan natin, himay-himayin natin yung mga planes on how to read the image. Okay? So, it would help. So, it would help muna. So, unahin muna natin ano yung mga possible signs na nakikita natin. Ngayon, ano kaya yung meaning ng mga signs na yon based dun sa context ng painting na yon or nung visual art na yon. Okay? So, that would be about reading the image. Very short lang yung discussion natin about reading the image. Okay? So, now we are going to jump to our discussion on art history. So we are going to start from the very beginning, from the prehistoric times to the contemporary times. Okay? So ito medyo mahaba tong discussion na to. So I guess I'm going to separate this into three videos. Okay? So kasi medyo may kahabaan siyang taglay. Okay, so now let's have art history. Okay, so we are going to focus again on the Western civilization art history. Okay, so because we have a different discussion for art in Asia. Okay, so let's start from the prehistoric period. Okay, so during the prehistoric times, the early humans had transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to that of a more permanent one, which led to early civilization. So again, it's a common knowledge to us all that during the prehistoric period, humans they are living like animals. Okay, and as we all know, most animals, they don't have like a territory before. So, pagala-gala lang din sila. Kung saan sila safe, doon sila. Okay? So, just like that, humans were also nomadic in lifestyle. Okay? Pero eventually, anong nangyari is nagkaroon sila ng sarili nilang lugar kung saan sila nagsettle, and then they created their own civilization. Okay? But before, again, nomadic sila. So, mamaya makikita natin kung ano yung implication ng pagiging nomadic nila doon sa kanilang mga art styles. Okay? So, number two, though prehistoric humans would not necessarily possess the complex rational capabilities to tell their story through written records and accounts, some artifacts would serve as storytellers. So, during the prehistoric times, they don't have a system of writing yet. Okay, so they don't have language yet. So most of the time, when they communicate with one another, they are mimicking the sounds of animals. Okay, so ayun nga, kung nakapanood kayo ng The Good Dinosaur, 'di ba, puro, alulong yung ginagawa nung bata, okay? Kasi nga wala pa silang system of writing nun, wala pa silang language nun, okay? So, most of the time sounds lang yung ginagawa nila. Ngayon, paano sila nakikipag-communicate with other people? So, they do it using their artworks. Okay? So, like cave drawings, cave paintings, ayun. So, it acts as their storyteller. So, because of the artworks or the paintings that they had in their caves, ang nangyari ay it became like a sort of parang a storyteller so that we know kung ano yung lifestyle nila before or ano yung mga pinagdaanan nila before. So, alam natin na they immersed themselves in hunting, ganyan, at anong klaseng mga hayop yung nag exist before because nakita natin sa drawings nila. Okay, so ano yung primary reason or ano yung primary objective ng kanilang mga artwork? So, ang kanilang objective is survival and observation. Okay? So, yung art nila ngayon ay utilitarian and not aesthetic. Okay? So, ano ba yung goal ng buhay nila noon? Survival and observation. Okay? So, anong nangyari is, yung mga tao noon, hindi sila yung aesthetic. Okay? Like, sasabihin nila na, Ay ano, bago 'tong kuweba na tinutulugan ko ngayon, siguro lalagyan ko siya ng flower vase para cute, o kaya lalagyan ko siya ng carpet, ganyan. Wala yung gano'ng ano, notion sa kanila na they have to make this cave beautiful. All they want is to make this place safe for them to stay for a couple of days before they move out again. So everything is temporary. So their primary objective is to stay alive, okay? So wala pa dahil nga gusto lang nilang mabuhay sa araw-araw, dahil maraming danger na nakapaligid sa kanila, wala na silang time para mag-isip kung ano yung maganda sa hindi. Okay? Even their clothing, basta it keeps them warm sa gabi, as long as it keeps them safe sa araw, so okay na yon. Wala na yung may mga borloloy pa silang ganyan-ganyan. Okay? So, ang ginagamit lang talaga nila sa sarili nila lagi is for survival. Okay? So, which means that the purpose of art during that time or during the prehistoric period is utilitarian. Okay? So, hindi sila more on the aesthetic. Okay? So, makikita natin yung mga artwork nila is more on utilitarian purposes. Now, we have three periods or ages of prehistoric time. So, we have Paleolithic, which is the Old Stone Age. We have the Mesolithic, which is the Middle Stone Age. And we have the Neolithic, which is the New Stone Age. Okay? So, what are the characteristics of prehistoric art? So, number one, reflecting their attitudes and belief system on spiritual, social, political, and economic matters. So, which means that their prehistoric art is concerned with their beliefs and their attitudes. Okay? So, kung ano yung pinaniniwalaan nila noon, most likely, yun yung gagawin nilang art or yun yung magiging inspiration nila for their artworks. Okay? So, kadalasan, laging yung mga nagagawa nila is for spiritual purposes or social purposes or political purposes or economic. Okay? So, economic, dahil wala pa naman sila mga negosyo noon, ginagamit nila doon is for like barter or pwede rin naman na ginagamit nila siya for hunting kasi wala pa naman silang stable economy noon eh. So, we can consider hunting as part of the economic matters. Okay? So, yun nga, yung mga weapons nila, yun. So, most likely, ang mga nagagawa nila is for utilitarian purposes. So, again, characteristics nila is in line with their spiritual belief, social belief, political beliefs, and economic matters. Okay? And then, second, use for survival and activities of daily life. Okay? So, kung ano yung na-observe nila sa araw-araw, yun yung ipe-paint nila. Okay? So, kung ano yung na-experience nila nung araw na yon, yun yung ilalagay nila sa cave. So, ano yung danger na kanilang na-encounter, so lalagay nila sa painting, sa cave, gano'n. O kaya yung survival din. So, yung mga tools na ginagawa nila, nag-uukit sila ng mga batong matatalim na ginagamit nila for survival, yon. Kasama yon sa mga artwork nila. Okay? So, makikita natin, again, yung characteristic niya is leaning toward their beliefs, their attitudes, for their survival, for their everyday life, yon. So, puro gano'n yung mga artworks na nagagawa nila. Okay, so prehistoric painting. How can we describe the prehistoric painting? So, prehistoric paintings noon, kadalasan ang mga themes nila is animal, spear, and other rudimentary materials were utilized. So, makikita natin yung mga paintings mamaya. Yung mga example is puro mga hunting yung theme nila. Okay? So, they were drawn on caves, stones, and on earth-filled ground. Kasi nga wala pa naman silang mga papel noon. So, puro stones yung gamit nila or rocks. Kaya nga siya Stone Age. Okay? So, yung mga nagiging canvas nila is mga caves, stones, and again, mga soil. Okay? So, anything na parang related to stones, rocks, and soil, yun yung nagiging materials nila. Even yung pang-ukit nila, even yung pang-drawing nila. Okay? So, next, primarily focused on hunting and ritual purposes. Okay? So, parang katulad din ng sinabi ko kanina about hunting or pwede rin naman na ritual purposes, spiritual nga. Okay? So, yung mga prehistoric painting, kung hindi survival, spiritual. Kung hindi spiritual, tungkol sa mga social or political yung mga ginagawa nila. Okay? So, pero hindi pa yung full-blown na political. Like, for example, yung mga leaders lang nila. Okay? Yung mga versus ibang mga groups din ng mga nomads, ganyan. Okay? So, let's have example. So, yan, prehistoric painting. Yan, makikita natin yung mga example ng cave painting. So, Hall of Bulls in Lascaux, France. So, yan, makikita natin. everyday life. Okay? So, yung kanilang hunting, makikita nila yung mga hayop na ganito, ido-drawing nila. So, anong nangyayari, storyteller itong mga to. Kasi dahil wala pa silang mga system of writing, pero dahil sa mga drawing nila na to, alam natin kung paano yung buhay nila noon. Okay? So, parang it gives us an idea kung paano sila nabuhay during the Stone Age. Okay? So, katulad nito, they are drawing their activity on how they were hunting animals. Ito din, yung mga animals na nakikita nila or na-encounter nila every day. Okay? So, ito ay Cueva de los Manos sa Argentina. So, yan ay parang for ritual purposes naman yan. So, parang coming of age ceremony nila yan eh. So, ang nabasa ko dyan is sila, may mga bata. So, kapag puberty stage na yung mga bata, sinasama na sila yung mga batang lalaki, sinasama na sila sa hunting. Okay? So, isasama sila sa hunting ngayon, tapos pag nakabalik sila ng ligtas, tapos pag may napatay sila na hayop, isasama yung kanilang kamay dyan. So, parang Hall of Fame, kumbaga, Hall of Survivors, kumbaga, yung ano, yung wall na yan. So, paano nila nagawa na binakat yung mga ano nila, mga kamay nila. So, ang sabi diyan is nagdurog-durog daw sila ng stones na matingkad yung kulay, and then meron silang parang yung sumpit, yung parang straw, tapos parang binubuga nilang ganyan, binubuga nila habang yung kamay nila nandun. So, nate-trace siya. Okay? So, yon kaya naging ganyan yung ano, yung marka nila. So, again, parang for ritual purposes naman yan. And then, another example of it is a Neolithic cave painting, again, showing hunting. So, yung mga prehistoric painting, most of the time, puro hunting talaga or ritual purposes yon. Kasi nga katulad na sabi natin kanina sa characteristic. Ayan. What about their sculpture? Okay, so for prehistoric sculpture, it consisted of rude forms carved in stone and wood. Kasi nga dahil nga wala pa silang ganung knowledge on how to use tools. And in the first place, wala pa naman silang yung sophisticated tools talaga. Pag nag-uukit sila, talagang knives lang yung gamit nila na made out of stone din. Okay, so kumbaga puro bato yung gamit nila. So nahihirapan silang mag-sculpt ngayon, nahihirapan silang umukit. Okay? Kaya rude forms na yung nagagawa nila, hindi refined forms, okay? Because of the lack of tools as well as the lack of education on how to create parang fine forms of sculpture, okay? So, they were created to commemorate heroes, heroines, and to perpetuate memory of men. So, yung mga ginagawa din nila minsan, they commemorate heroes, yung mga sikat nung panahon nila, mapababae, mapalalaki, or yung mga alaala ng mga namatay nilang kamag-anak. Okay? So, nandun na sila sa point na pag may namatay silang kamag-anak, pag gusto nilang alalahanin yon, ginagawa nila ng sculpture so that they would feel that their past loved one is still with them. Okay? And then, the most common is they created sculptures to honor their gods and goddesses. Okay? So, gumagawa sila ng mga imahen para yun yung i-worship nila. So, yun nga, gods and goddesses yung ginagawa. So, yun yung mga characteristics naman ng prehistoric sculpture. So, it's either about heroes or heroines or yung dead loved ones nila or yung gods and goddesses nila. And most of the time, it is carved in stone or wood. Okay? So, ayan, magbigay tayo ng example. So, for prehistoric sculptures, you have Lipensky Vir. Actually, the Lipensky Vir is not a sculpture, okay? So, it is an archaeological site, okay? Lugar siya, hindi siya nag-iisang sculpture. Pero, dun sa Lipensky Vir, marami kayong makikita ng mga ganitong sculpture, okay? So, it dates back to the prehistoric times, okay? So, itong mga to daw ay mga parang ginawa nila yung mga figure na yan, parang figure ng mga sarili nila, no, mga nakatira pa dun sa sa lugar na yon, dun sa Lipensky Vir. Next is the Venus of Losel. Okay, so Venus, actually, hindi naman talaga si Venus yung sinasamba nila or hindi naman talaga Venus yung pangalan nito kasi nga prehistoric pa to eh. And as we all know, Venus is a Roman name. Okay? So, bakit Venus yung tawag? Because the archaeologists, when they discovered this, they concluded that these Venuses or these sculptures of a busty woman, malaki yung dibdib, and then malaki yung balakang, this is a sculpture that they intend to worship for fertility and for childbirth. Okay? So, syempre, related to fertility and childbirth and beauty and love. Okay? So, si Venus kasi yung associated doon. So, kaya tinawag nilang Venus yung mga sculptures na ganyan. Lahat ng prehistoric sculptures na ganyan yung itsura, yung malalaki yung dibdib at balakang, Venus yung naging standard na tawag ng mga archaeologists. Okay? So, nag-iiba-iba lang sila, depende dun sa lugar kung saan sila na-discover. So, ito, Venus of Losel. So, ito, Venus of Willendorf, and ito ay Venus of Brasampui. Okay? So, makikita natin, lahat ng mga babaeng sculpture or lahat ng mga sculpture na nagpapakita ng figure ng isang babae, Venus yung tinawag ng mga archaeologists. Okay? Now, question, bakit malaki yung dibdib at yung balakang ng mga Venuses? Okay? Aside from this one, kasi nasira na daw to yung Venus of Brasampui. Okay, so bakit malalaki yung kanilang mga dibdib? So katulad kanina, ayan, yung Venus of Losel, malaki din yung dibdib tsaka yung balakang. Same with Venus of Willendorf. So bakit malalaki yung dibdib at yung balakang? Because they associate, of course, breasts are for breastfeeding. So this is for healthy, parang a healthy body of a woman who can give birth. Okay? So yung malaking balakang din naman is a good sign for childbirth. Kasi kapag masyadong payat daw, mahirapan magbuntis. So, mas malaki yung balakang, mas malaki yung dibdib, ibig sabihin, parang ang implication niya is mas healthy yung pagbubuntis niya or mas capable siya to bear many children. And for them, before, the more children you bear, parang the more blessed you are. Okay? So, yun yung kanilang paniniwala. Now, bakit mga babae yung kanilang sinasamba? So, in contrary with contemporary times na very patriarchal yung ating pagsamba. Pero yung mga nung prehistoric times, mga babae yung sinasamba nila. Simply because they believe and they give respect to women because women are the only ones who can give birth. Okay? So, para sa kanila, yung mga babae, parang may miracle silang ginagawa kasi sa kanila nanggagaling yung buhay. Okay? So, yung mga males, they are honored because of protection. But childbirth, giving another life, yun yung gift ng women. Okay? So, parang nagpapasalamat sila sa mga babae kasi yung mga babae, kung wala yung mga babae, wala lahat. Parang ganun yung view nila. Kaya nila sinasamba yung mga Venuses. Okay? Kasi ito ay parang sila yung nagbibigay ng blessing of life. Okay? So, what about prehistoric architecture? So, it started during the Neolithic age because sabi nga natin kanina, 'di ba, nomadic yung mga tao. So, hindi pa sila nagtatayo ng mga kung ano-ano. Wala pa silang ginagawa na architecture kasi nga palipat-lipat lang sila. Tapos mga kuweba lang yung ano nila, yung ginagawa nila. And then they don't even design their caves kasi nga temporary lang 'yon, temporary shelter lang 'yon. Okay? But during the Neolithic age, they started to create these mga infrastructures that they use for rituals, they use for ceremonies, okay? So during the Paleolithic and the Mesolithic, they used caves for shelter and most probably for religious ceremonies, okay? So ito yung nung Paleolithic and Mesolithic, medyo nomadic pa sila nito. Okay? But during the Neolithic age, parang nagkaroon na sila ng sense na they must create something, okay? Or they must parang erect something. So, the oldest traces of man, again, stone tools. Okay? So, yun nga. Yung, bukod sa mga cave paintings, yung pinakaluma na mga traces ng tao would be yung mga tools na ginamit nila. Okay? So, ano yung mga example natin ng prehistoric architecture? Okay, so meron tayong tinatawag na menhirs, dolmens, at saka yung last yung cromlechs. Okay, so ano yung tatlo na to? So ito yung tatlong examples ng prehistoric architecture. Kasi nga, hindi pa sila makapag-erect or hindi pa sila makapag-build ng something na complicated or very intricate since they don't have the tools yet. Okay, so ano yung pwede nilang gawin or ano yung mga ginagawa nila? So, number one is yung menhirs. So, yung menhirs, sila po yung mga bato. Ito yung mga bato, as in, malalaking bato. So, yan yung mga ginagamit nila. So, malalaking bato sila na naka-erect lang, single column lang sila, okay? So, para lang silang, isang tower na ganyan, isang buong bato yan, okay? So, hindi nila yan, pinagpatong-patong na maliliit na bato, isa talagang isang malaking slab ng bato yan na tinayo nilang gano'n, okay? 'Pag isa lang, tapos nakatayong ganyan, tawag do'n ay menhirs, okay? So, ang menhirs po ay ginagawa nila for ritual purposes. They believe that when you gather around the menhir tapos naka-point siya to the sky, so parang nagiging ano siya, nagiging, Wi-Fi signal, parang nagiging ano siya, nagiging cable, basta nagiging signal siya, nagiging antenna siya para mas malakas yung prayers kasi naka-direct siya dun sa taas, okay? So, yun yung ano nila sa menhirs. What about dolmens? Yung dolmens naman, ang kanyang characteristics ay dalawang menhirs, so isang menhir dito, isang menhir dito, tapos merong isang slab pa na nasa taas. So, ganyan yung itsura niya, dolmen. So, kumbaga parang ang shape niya ay pie, yung pag gano'n, yung may dalawa dito tapos may isang pa-ganyan sa taas, okay? So, yun yung tinatawag natin na dolmens. Yun yung pagkakaiba nila ng menhirs, okey? 'Pag dolmens kailangan may dalawang column tapos may isang parang roof kind of stone, na ito din ay gawa sa mga bato na malalaki, okay? So, hindi yan pinagpatong-patong or pinagdikit-dikit. Talagang isang buong malaking bato 'to, isang malaking bato 'to, ta's itong nasa taas isang malaking bato rin, okey? So, hindi siya yung parang bricks or hollow blocks na magkakadikit na gano'n. Talagang isang malaking slab 'yan sila na tinayo, okey? So, ayan, dolmens po 'pag ganyan. Para saan naman yung dolmens? Ang dolmens ay ginagamit nila para parang burial site. So, dito nila nililibing yung mga tao sa ilalim, okay? Yung ibang tao kasi they do mummification, yung iba naman through jars. Okay, but other, people during the prehistoric times, they bury their dead, okay? So, 'pag bine-bury nila yung dead nila, dito nila nilalagay sa dolmens, okay? Diyan siya sa ilalim or sila, yung pamilya nila diyan sa ilalim. Okay? Now, what about the last one, which is the cromlechs? Okay? So, yung cromlechs naman ay mga menhir at mga dolmens na nakapaikot or naka-spiral. So, the most famous example for that would be the Stonehenge. Okay? So, ayan, makikita nyo na mga malaking bato talaga yan sila, malaking slab sila, tapos meron sa taas. Kung ito lang po, ayan, kung ito lang yung makikita natin, yan ay isang uh, dolmens, okay? Pero tapos 'pag ito lang, menhirs lang siya. Pero dahil, magkakasama sila at nakabilog sila, cromlechs na yung tawag, okay? So, para saan ginagamit yung cromlechs? Ang cromlechs hindi para sa rituals. Actually, hindi pa sure hanggang sa ngayon kung para saan ginagamit yung Stonehenge, pero, scientists, archaeologists, ang naisip nilang dahilan kung para saan ito is because of the rituals, okay? Para sa mga ritual purposes or ceremony purposes pa rin siya, okay? So, ayun, yung cromlechs. So next is we're through with the prehistoric period. We are now moving on to our early Egyptian period. Okay, so for early Egyptian period, so Egypt for a long period was under the centralized rule of a pharaoh, the dynasties of which mark the periods of Egyptian history. So ayun, actually yung Egypt kasi dati meron siyang upper kingdom, may lower kingdom. So hati siya sa dalawa. Pero since nagkaroon ng kay King Narmer or King Menes na unify na yung Egypt, okay? So, yung ruler ng Egypt, ang tawag nila doon ay eto, Pharaoh, okay? So, tapos nagkakaroon ng dynasties, okay? So, ang nangyari kasi niyan, yung siyempre, yung anak nila yung nagro-rule, yung anak ng anak nila nagro-rule. So, puro magkakamag-anak yung nagro-rule. And Egyptians before, they also commit like incest, okay? As in with immediate family members. Like, yung kapatid mo mismo yung magiging asawa mo or yung tito mo yung magiging asawa mo. So, parang some sort of like that, okay? Which also made their DNA parang ano, medyo sickly, masyado silang sakitin. Kaya kung mapapansin natin, yung mga Egyptians o yung mga Egyptian rulers, sometimes hindi sila umaabot ng 30 years old kasi nga namamatay na sila during their puberty because of a lot of complications na dahil sa inbreeding, okay? So going back, we have the art of ancient Egypt was closely knit with religion. So alam naman natin yan lahat. So ang kanilang mga artworks ay kadalasan about religion. Okay? So since the people there believed in life after death, it was in accordance with this belief that the Egyptians devoted more time and effort into the building of tombs rather than into the construction of dwellings. So kung makikita natin, yung pinaka naaalala natin about Egypt are what? The pyramids, okay, which served as the tombs for the rulers or the ancient rulers, okay? So bakit pinabongga, kahit bakit bonggang-bongga yung kanilang libingan. So, libingan na nga lang, bakit sobrang gara pa? Kasi nga, they believe in life after death. Okay? So, they believe na pag nagising sila ulit, yun pa rin yung magiging mismong bahay nila. Kaya pinapaganda nila yun. Kasi they feel that they are going to bring that or they are going to bring their possessions even after death. Okay? So, kaya lahat ng pag-aari nila, nilalagay nila doon. Kasi sa paniniwala nila, lahat ng mga iniimbak nila dun sa ano nila, sa pyramid nila ay madadala nila in the afterlife, okay? Kaya kailangan mas maraming dala, mas mayaman ka in the afterlife, okay? So again, ano yung mga key concepts natin in early Egyptian art? So religion. So they believe in religion, in their religion, and then lahat ng mga artworks nila is closely knit with religion. So what are the characteristic of early Egyptian art? So number one, there is a strong sense of order. Okay, so symmetry and highly implied with mathematical computations. Talagang their construction kailangan naka-compute, gaano kataas. So yun ay talagang sukat na sukat nila. So makikita natin doon nagsimula kasi para mga geometrical figures eh. So makikita nga natin na yung pagkaka-construct nila ng mga pyramids nila as well as their temples very sturdy because of the sense of order and of course because ginamitan nila ng computation. So second, all figures must stand on horizontal lines. Okay? So next, eyes, shoulders, and torso are seen from the front. So makikita nyo, merong distinct position yung mga sculptures and then yung mga paintings ng Egypt na talagang yung kanilang eyes, shoulders, and yung torso nila nakaharap. Okay? So nakaharap. Pero minsan yung mga paa nila, yung mga kamay nila nasa gilid, nakaganyan. Okay? So may tawag doon sa form na yon. And lastly, higher ranking officials were depicted within the rules, more strictly seemingly more rigid. Okay? So yun nga, hindi sila natural yung figure ng pagkaka-depict sa art nila ng mga tao. Parang matigas yung katawan, hindi katulad ng mga art ng mga Romans or ng mga Greeks na medyo fluid yung movement. Yung mga Egyptians noon is very sturdy yung kanilang mga artwork. Okay, so ang tawag po natin doon sa sinasabi ko kanina na form is composite pose. Okay? So makikita natin yung eyes nila nakikita sa harap where it should be na kapag nakatingin ka dito sa gilid, dapat yung mata mo ay nakaharap na doon. Pero sa kanila yung mata mo nandito sa gilid. Okay? So ayan, makikita natin yung mata ay nakaharap, yung shoulders ay nakaharap, yung torso ay nakaharap din, pero everything else ay naka-sideways na. Yun yung tinatawag natin na composite pose. Okay? So ayan, makikita natin na ang katawan ay straight, ang balikat ay straight, pero ang kamay ay nasa gilid, ganyan. Tapos nakaganon yung ulo, pero yung mata mo nandito. So, medyo mahirap siya. So, makikita natin dito, yung movement nila parang hindi natural. It's not fluid. It's actually rigid. Pag sinabi na rigid, parang matigas yung katawan, okay? So, katulad niyan, parang masyado silang rigid tignan, okay? So, yan. Tapos, makikita natin, there's a sense of order. Why? Because all of the artworks are uniform. Okay? Hindi katulad natin ngayon na ito yung art style ko, ito yung art style mo. So, unique tayo sa bawat isa. Pero, sa kanila, kahit magkakaiba yung mga artists, pare-parehas pa rin na composite pose yung fina-follow. Okay? Why? Because there's a strong sense of order and unity. So, uniform lang yung sinusunod nila. So, ayun po, makikita natin yung mga artworks kanina, yung mga painting ay, ayan, makikita natin closely knit with religion. Okay, so about rulers or religion. Okay, next. What are the milestones in the early Egyptian art? Okay, so for the Old Kingdom, meron tayo, ayan, yung mga sculptures and then yung paintings natin. Ito yung tinatawag natin na Marmor palette. So, parang ang nangyari dyan is, isa siyang slab ng stone na merong mga ukit may mga ukit doon, pinapakita kung paano ni-unify ni King Narmer or ni King Menes yung dalawang magkahiwalay na kingdom ng Egypt. So, siya yung kauna-unahang hari ng Egypt, ng unified Egypt, okay? So, because he unified the two kingdoms of Egypt, okay? So, again, si King Narmer, yon. So, yung Narmer palette, alam naman natin yung palette yung pinaglalagyan ng makeup, right? So, halimbawa, meron kayong eyeshadow palette. So, iba't ibang kulay yun nandun. The same way, etong Narmer palette ay ginagamit din ni King Narmer, allegedly, ginagamit ni King Narmer, or ginagamit rather ng mga attendants si King Narmer para i-apply yung kanyang makeup before his ceremony. Okay, so dyan sila nagtitimpla ngayon ng pang-makeup nila kay King Narmer. Okay, kaya siya tinawag na Narmer palette. And then, aside from its function that it is a palette, yun nga, meron din siyang historical basis because it tells the history of Egypt, or rather, the history of how King Narmer or King Menes unified Egypt. Okay, so the next one is we have stone drawings and carvings. Okay, so ito ay dahil nga very early pa yung civilization ng Old Kingdom, makikita natin it is closely related with the art styles of those people from the prehistoric era or prehistoric period. Okay? So next is we have Old Kingdom. So from 2613 BCE to 2181 BCE. So sobrang tagal na nito. Okay, so we have the Sphinx at Giza and we have the Pyramid of King Djoser. So, ito ay sobrang lalaki. Kita niyo yung mga tao, ito, ang liliit nila. So, ganito kalaki yung pyramid. Again, tomb siya ni King Djoser. So, makikita natin, itong mga to, gigantic talaga sila. Sobrang lalaki nila. So, how were the Egyptians able to construct these infrastructures na very basic pa lang yung mga tools nila? Kasi nga, yun nga, talaga nagbuhos sila ng effort dito because they believe that the more or the grander the tombs are, the more powerful you are in the afterlife. So, wala silang pakialam kung magkano yung magagastos nila. Basta maganda yung tomb nila because they believe they are going to bring that along in the afterlife. Okay? So, we have the famous Sphinx of Giza. So, we have yung head of a person or head ng pharaoh, and then yung katawan niya is yung lion. At yung famous dyan na kwento is yun nga, nagbibigay siya ng mga riddles. Pag nasagot mo yung riddles, yun, may gagrant siya na favor sa'yo. Pag di mo nasagot yung riddle, papatayin ka niya. So, parang nagiging guardian na din siya ng mga pyramids, ng mga tombs sa folklore, okay? So, next we have the Middle Kingdom. So, 2040 to 1782 BCE. So, this one is the Temple of Karnak in Thebes. So, ayan, makikita natin, malalaki din to, super laki din ng mga yan. So, makikita natin na ang ang sculpture nila gigantic din but showing very rigid forms. Okay? So they don't have complicated details yet. So they don't have like details on the clothes. Meron naman silang clothes pero parang minimal lang yung mga designs. More on sulat, more on carving ng sulat. Okay? So this is a temple, again, closely related to religion. So this infrastructure was actually erected for ritual purposes or ceremony purposes, so related to religion again. Next is we have the New Kingdom, so 1570 BCE to 1069 BCE. Ito yung famous na mga rulers ng Egypt. So we have Death Mask of Tutankhamun. So this is one of the most famous caskets out there. Why? Because of the solid gold. Okay, so yan, makikita natin, mamahaling mga bato yan. So this is solid gold and lapis lazuli. Mamahalin yung mga ginamit dito na materials. So, this one is the bust of Nefertiti. Allegedly, anak ni Nefertiti si Tutankhamun, but it's not sure. But, according to their DNA results, magkamag-anak sila. Pero, wala namang question doon kasi nga, lahat naman ng pharaohs and mga royalties ng Egypt ay magkakamag-anak kasi nga they are incestuous. They are practicing inbreeding. Okay? So, yun nga, si Nefertiti is famous because she is one of the leaders. She is a leader alongside with her husband. They changed the they changed the worship of Egypt from polytheistic to monotheistic. So, mula sa pagiging maraming Diyos na sinasamba, yung Egypt, pinalitan nila yun ng isang Diyos na lang yung sasambahin, which is si Ra. Okay? So, yun nga yung, ano, yung Diyos ng araw. So, pinalitan nila yon. So, next is we have early Greek period. So, we are now going to discuss early Greek period. Ancient Greek art proper emerged during the 8th century BCE. So, ayun po, the Greeks were known to excel in various fields and aspects of society, such as poetry, drama, philosophy, and the arts. So, fine arts. For this civilization, man was at the center of society, and the humanist ideals of the Greeks were reflected in their democratic form of government. The Greeks are passionate about natural phenomenon and believed that nature should be in perfect order. And because of being idealistic, their principles, belief systems, and ideologies are at the core of Greek art and architecture. In this period, the Greeks created art with man in center. So, meaning they don't really, although they give honor to the gods and goddesses, but they focus on man itself. Man was the focus, or man was the inspiration for their art. Okay? Even the gods and goddesses, they are using parang the image of man. So, parang yung mga naging, yung gods and goddesses, sinusunod din nila yung itsura ng tao. Okay? So, ayun nga, makikita natin na they believe, actually, Greek period, one of the key characteristics of Greek period or Greek art is they believe na everything should be idealistic. Okay? So, everything should be near perfect. Okay? So, ayan nga. So, characteristics of early Greek art. So, it is often represented by the mythological gods. So, early Greek pa ito, early Greek. Okay? So, we have mythological gods. So, sought to capture the perfect physical form of their objects in artwork. So we have art, expression of perfection, and the classical ideals. Exploring the aesthetics and philosophical ideals. So more on the aesthetics na sila. So kung nung prehistoric times ay utilitarian, dito na pumapasok yung tinatawag natin na aesthetics. Okay? So yung ano natin, yung Egyptian kasi is like a transition eh. More on religion yung ating Egyptian. Pero, itong Greek art na to, more on perfection, philosophy, and aesthetics na sila. Okay? So, we have three periods in ancient Greece. The first one is archaic or Daedalic. The second one is classical or Hellenic. And number three is Hellenistic. Actually, when you analyze this word, which is Helen, so Helen is the most beautiful woman, right? Most beautiful woman in the world, according to the mythology. So, siya yung pinakamagandang babae na pinag-away-awayan pa siya. So, parang yung the face that launched 1,000 ships nga siya, si Helen. So, ganun siya kaganda. So, parang yun yung naging standard ng mga Greek sa paggawa ng kanilang artwork. Kailangan perfect, kailangan maganda. So, katulad ni Helen. Kaya siya tinag na Hellenic or Hellenistic. Okay? So, we have archaic period. So, for the archaic period, ito yung early Greek pa to. Okay? So, hindi pa siya yung ganun ka-perfect. So, ano yung ginagamit nila dito? They use geometric standards. So, they are actually using parang mga geometric shapes. They're not really realistic yet. So, they are not yet going to the perfectionist side. They are more on the geometric shapes. So geometric standards. So although the angular elements are more rounded, the sizes are closer to reality. Number two, place importance on human figures, showing the influence of Egyptian sculpture in its frontality and rigidity. In this period, the artworks of the Greeks are some sort of following the standards of the Egyptians. They are not developing their own style yet. So they are still following the inspiration of the Egyptians, which shows rigidity. Okay? Yung katulad nga na sinabi natin kanina. Yung mga balikat ay straight na straight, tuwid na tuwid yung katawan. Okay? So yun yung mga pina-follow pa nila. Wala pa yung mga, alam natin na mga classical Greek na sculptures. Okay? And then, their sculptures and drawings are more on the geometric pang side. So, ayan, mga examples. So, in their pottery, their designs are very geometric. So, makikita natin more on patterns. Ayan, makikita natin more on patterns, yung kanilang mga designs. So, meron tayong mga lines, may mga rectangle, ayan. So, very geometric siya. And then we have the chorus and the chore. So, the chorus ay yung male form, chore ay female form. So, makikita natin, 'di ba, parang kamukha niya yung sa mga Egyptian. Bakit? Kasi nga yung balikat straight, yung katawan straight na straight, parang ang tigas ng katawan. So, parang yung ano, parang sundalo yung dating, okay? So, matikas yung pagkaka-ano nila, pagkaka-sculpt nila, following the Egyptian example. Ayan. Other examples or artifacts of pottery during the archaic period. Ayan nga, pinapakita natin na very geometric yung mga shapes. Ayan, spiral. So, mga circle, ayan. Very simple designs. So, jump naman tayo sa classical period. So, it is called as Golden Age or Age of Pericles or Pericles. So, the peak of cultural achievement. So, lahat ng nakikita nyo or karamihan sa mga nakikita ninyo na mga sculptures na classical sa Greek, dito na yon nanggaling, okay? Many statues depicted young victors of Greek games. So, although they are depictions or they are sculptures of gods and goddesses, pero dito na rin umuusbong yung ginagawa ng sculpture, yung mga mortal or yung mga tao mismo. So, yun nga, usually, yung mga nananalo ng Greek games or ng mga Olympics, yun yung ginagawa nila ng sculpture. So, the human body was the emphasis of art. So, dito na yung part na they strive for perfection, as real as possible. Okay? And then lastly, rebuilding of temples and focusing on creative artworks. Okay? So, dito naman sila nagke-create na rin sila ng mga temples na sobrang lalaki, and then they are going to put like sculptures na very human-like, very realistic, ganyan. Ayan, so ito ay example sa classical period. So ito ay sa drawing, sa mga drawing nila. Ayan, makikita nyo na medyo hindi pa rin siya gano'n ka-realistic, but they are using designs, mga designs na, and then they are exploring with colors. So before, hindi naman masyadong ma-color. Ito ay tapestry. So ibig sabihin yung parang carpet. Ayan. So ayan, fresco, ginamitan siya ng fresco. And then ito naman ay classical Greek pottery. Ayan, makita natin. So, Discobulus or discus thrower by Miron, and then lance bearer by Polykleitos. Ito kasi may hawak siya din dapat na lance or yung parang sibat. May hawak siya na lance dyan dapat, kaso nga lang nawala na ata yun, hindi na nakita. Ayan, so ito makikita natin na sila very realistic na yung proportion ng katawan nila, very natural na yung ano nila, yung tayo nila, hindi na ganun ka-rigid. Tapos yung movement na kina-capture nila, realistic na rin. So, aiming again to be as realistic as possible or as real as possible. So, they are aiming for perfect form. So, yan, discus thrower by Miron. Makikita natin even the muscles, ayan, even the proportion, even the hair, the facial expression, makikita natin. Ayan, very realistic na sila. So, yung iba nagko-question sila, ma'am, bakit po maliliit? Okay, bakit daw maliliit yung edits ng mga ano, ng mga sculpture? Kasi nga the ancient Greeks believed that the value of man is his mind and not his sexuality, okay? Kasi parang they believe na kapagka you are parang being controlled by your sexual desires or your sexual urges, you are not different, or you are not really different from animals. Okay? Kasi animals are being ruled by their sexual desires also eh. So kung hindi mo ginagamit yung isip mo at mas gumagana yung sexual desires mo, ibig sabihin parang hayop ka na rin. Okay? Kaya ang ginagawa nila, they do not emphasize this, rather they emphasize this. Okay? So eto, pinapalit nila kasi parang para sa kanila, eto hindi to mahalaga. Ang mahalaga is yung faculties of the mind, okay? So, yun nga, very sapiosexual kasi yung mga Athenians. Ay, mga Athenians kasi kadalasan yung gumagawa ng mga artworks. Okay, so they have the Erectium. So, makikita nyo, very elaborate din yung pagkakagawa ng temples. Yung mismo mga poste ay mga figures ng tao, okay? So, napaka-tedious gawin yan. And then we have the Parthenon in Athens. Okay, so parang in honor to their patron god Athena. So makikita natin yan, mga temples din. Nandun na sila sa point na sila ay gumagawa ng elaborate temples. So ayan, makikita natin. Ayan, Acropolis. So, just imagine kung gaano ka-lively 'tong, place na 'to nung unang panahon. Sobrang garbo nitong lugar na 'to. Okay, kasi they are aiming for perfection. So next is we have the Hellenistic period, so the last period of the Greek civilization. So we have the ideals of classicism went into eclipse and gave rise to a new set of aesthetic ideals. So emotion replaced classical restraint and serenity. Art became imbued with dynamism and movement. Okay, so these are the characteristics for the Hellenistic period. Now let's have examples of it. Okay, so sabi nga natin kanina na most likely kasi nung Hellenic period or nung classical age, sila ay nagpapakita lang ng perfection, nagpapakita sila ng, perfection in terms of like visual arts, in sculpture, ganyan. So they are trying to be as realistic as possible using visual arts, okay? But they are not pertaining so much about emotions. Kung makikita niyo yung mga sculptures, yung mukha nila very serene lang. Parang very calm yung mukha nila. Pero pagdating ng Hellenistic period, they are emphasizing about emotions. And how can they emphasize emotions? They are now using plays. Okay? So gumagawa na sila ngayon ng mga plays. Yun talaga yung umaarte sila. Kaya nagkaroon ng kaliwat kanang pagtatayo din ng mga theater. So you have the Great Theater of Ephesus, and then you have the Great Theater of Dionysus. So ayan, ganyan siya kalalaki. Tapos nandyan sa gitna, nagpa-perform yung mga actors and then yung mga singers. In that way, emotions are emphasized because of the drama. So, yun nga. Nagkakaroon sila ng mga drama, nagkakaroon sila ng mga komedya. Okay? And then, nagkaroon din sila ng likeness to painting. Nagkaroon sila ng parang interest to painting. So, nagkaroon ng um, paligsahan si Zeuxis and then si Parrhasius. The concern here is that Zeuxis and Parrhasius are two famous painters during the Hellenistic period. Okay? So, dalawa sila na magkalaban na pintor kasi para silang magaling. Okay? So, para mapag-decidean or para malaman ng lahat kung sino talaga yung mas magaling sa kanilang dalawa, nagkaroon sila ng contest. Okay? So, nagkaroon sila ng patimpalak. Actually, hindi to yung mismong painting nila. So, ito ay nakuha lang sa mga anecdotes at nakuha lang sa mga accounts, so historical accounts, okay? So, yun nga, nagkaroon sila ng paligsahan. So, para malaman kung sino talaga yung mas magaling na pintor, gagawa sila ng painting na, kumbaga, ito ay dapat na as real as possible. Okay? So, si Zeuxis, ang nangyari ay siya ay nagpaint ng isang ubas. So, nagpaint siya ng ubas ngayon. Tapos, so sobrang realistic ng kanyang pagpe-paint ng ubas, may ibon na lumapit, tapos tinutuka yung kanyang painting. So, even yung ibon ay naloko dahil akala ng ibon, totoo yung ubas na pinaint niya. So, ganun ka-accurate yung pagkaka-paint niya ng ubas na even yung ibon, akala niya totoong prutas yun. Okay? So, ganun kagaling si Zeuxis. Ngayon, nung turn na ni Parrhasius, so pumunta na ngayon sila sa bahay ni Parrhasius, tapos ipapakita na niya yung kanyang painting. Tapos, okay, so nandun na sila sa bahay. Tapos, tinatanong siya ni Zeuxis, "Oh, ano ba yan, Parrhasius? Ano ba, may laban ka pa ba sa akin?" Ganyan. So, ganun yung maangas si Zeuxis kasi alam niya panalo na siya kasi nga sobrang realistic ng painting niya, pati yung ibon na nauto eh, ganyan. So, sabi niya, "Asan ba yung painting na pinagmamalaki mo?" Tapos sabi ni Parrhasius, "Ayun yung painting ko, hawiin mo na lang yung kurtina." So, pumunta dun si Zeuxis, tapos hinawi niya yung kurtina, pero to his surprise, hindi niya mahawi-hawi yung kurtina kasi yun pala yung mismong painting, yung kurtina. Okay, so ibig sabihin, naloko ng painting ni Parrhasius si Zeuxis. Okay, so ibig sabihin, mas magaling na painter si Parrhasius kasi si Zeuxis, ibon yung naloko niya. Pero si Parrhasius, mismo si Zeuxis, yung isa sa pinakamagaling na pintor ng panahon na yon ay naloko niya dahil sobrang totoo nung painting niya na kortina. Akala ni Zeuxis totoong kortina yon. Okay, so the winner of the contest was Parrhasius. So yun yung naging parang legendary face-off nilang dalawa ni Zeuxis. Yun nga, ang drawing ni Zeuxis ay ubas, ang drawing ni Parrhasius ay cortina. So, ayan, makita natin si Laocoon and his sons. So, Hellenistic na ito. Makikita natin very real yung proportion, even yung mga ugat, even yung buhok, pati yung facial expression. Kasi kung mapapansin natin before, yung mga examples natin, yun nga yung Discobolus, tsaka yung Lance-bearer, parang emotionless sila. Pero, no Hellenistic period, they are paying attention to emotions na. So makikita natin yung mukha ni Laocoon pati ng mga bata, yung mga anak niya, yung makikita niyo yung emotion dun sa mukha nila. And then yung the proportion as well and the muscles. What else? Si Dying Goal. So makikita natin ngayon yung buhok niya, very realistic, even his posture kasi nga mamamatay na siya. So makikita natin parang may paghihirap na nangyayari, okay? So nagiging realistic sila at the same time they are paying attention to the emotions. So this one is Rape of Persephone. So malaki tong ano na 'to, itong, tawag nito, sculpture na 'to, pero nag-focus lang ako dun sa part na very intricate yung pagkakagawa. Kasi ito ay stone, eh, ito ay stone. So, matigas na material 'tong ginamit para sa sculpture na 'to. Pero tingnan niyo 'tong part na 'to, 'di ba? Parang totoong flesh ng tao na parang nung pinisil ay malambot. Pero kung hahawakan niyo 'to, matigas 'to kasi nga stone siya. So makikita nyo dito yung amount of effort, yung amount of work to make it realistic, okay? Kahit na mahirap yung material na pasunurin kasi matigas nga siya, stone siya, pero nagawa nila na pagmukhain siyang malambot kasi nga they are trying to achieve the realistic effect, okay? So ayan, ito ay Rape of Persephone. So we have the Greek architecture. So marble and stones are predominant building materials. Post and lintel system of architecture. Pag sinabing post and lintel, may mga poste, tapos may mga nasa taas, parang dolmens ang datingan. So, ganun kadalasan yung Greek architecture. And then, development of 3 styles or orders of columns. So, we have 3 orders of columns. So, ito, pagka linya nyo ay gagawa kayo ng bahay, like yun nga, yung tinuruan ko last semester, last semester, yung mga civil engineering, yun nga, dahil more on construction sila, ito yung mahalaga na matutunan nila. So, yung mga orders ng column. So, for Greek orders, meron tayong 3 orders sa Greek. So, we have the Doric, we have the Ionic, and then we have the Corinthian. So, 3 column order. So, the first one is Doric. So, for Doric, ganyan yung itsura niya. It has a plain abacus capital. Ito lang, yung taas niya. Very plain lang siya. Tapos, medyo pataba yung baba niya. So, it has the shortest, most massive, and has no base. Okay? So, pag sinabi natin yung base, yung nasa baba niya. Okay? So, yung Doric, straight lang yung taas niya, katulad nito. Ayan, straight lang yung taas niya. Tapos, ito, mataba. Malalaki yung post niya, tas wala siyang base. Diretso siya sa sahig, okay? What about Ionic? For Ionic naman, it has taller and slender than the Doric order. So, hindi siya yung matabang-matabang ganyan, tas medyo palaki. So, straight siyang ganyan, na matangkad, okay? Tapos medyo slender siya, pero hindi super slender. Medyo slender lang compared to Doric. And then, it has an either pair of spirals or volutes, capital, and the base. So, meron na siyang base. So, meron na siya, ito na yung poste, tas meron siyang parang ganyan sa baba. Okay? So, yun po yung yun po yung Ionic. So, yun yung paano natin malalaman na Ionic pag meron tayong spiral na nakikita dyan sa taas. Tas medyo slender siya. What about Corinthian? So, Corinthian is the most elaborate, most beautiful out of the 3 column orders of Greek architecture. Okay? So, it has the most beautiful ornaments, tallest and most slender order. So, mataas tong mga poste na to or orders na to. And has a capital featuring acanthus leaves and has a base. So, para sila may base ng Ionic, pang pinagkaiba lang nila is merong design yung capital niya. Pag sinabing capital, itong taas. Okay? So, yung Doric walang base, flat lang, straight lang, Ionic spiral, Corinthian ay elaborate. Okay? So, ayan po yung itsura niya, yung Doric kung tawagin. Okay, so ito yung Doric natin, makikita natin straight lang po yung taas niya, tapos mataba siya, kadalasan palaki siya sa baba kasi nga wala siyang base, so mas malaki siya sa baba para hindi siya matumba. Okay, so diretso na siya sa sahig, ganyan. What about yung ating tinatawag na Ionic, okay? So, yung Ionic naman natin meron tayong volute, okay? So, meron tayong spiral na ganyan, tapos meron tayong mga, yung may mga ridges, yung parang may mga paloob-paloob ganyan. So, may mga ridges yung gilid niya. Hindi lang siya basta straight. So, meron siya may mga fillet siya tsaka flute, may mga paloob siya may mga nakapaloob siya, may mga ridges siya sa gilid. Tapos meron siyang base, ito. Compared sa Doric na walang base, ito may base. And then Corinthian order, natakpan ng video ko. Pero yun nga, just imagine nyo na lang yung kanina, may ganyan siya sa taas. Okay, ito. Tapos katulad ng Ionic, may ridges din siya. Meron din siyang flute tsaka fillet. Yung sa gilid, tas meron din siyang base. Okay? So, ayan po yung itsura niya. So, now we are going to discuss the early Roman period naman. Okay, so the early Roman period, the Romans admired the older Greek civilization and propagated it throughout the empire. So actually, yung mga Romans, idol nila yung mga Greeks. So halos lahat ng kanilang mga ideas, kinuha nila mula sa Greek. So kung tutuusin, yung mga Romans, ang dakilang manggagaya. Dahil nga halos lahat ng mga ideas ng Greek, kinuha nila, inadapt nila, tapos mas pinaganda lang nila ng konti. Pero yun nga, inadapt pa rin nila yun galing sa mga Greeks, okay? So, fusion of Greek and Roman cultures that can be seen in most Roman artworks. Again, you cannot really remove the influence of the Greeks on the Roman artwork kasi nga halos lahat ng Roman artworks ay heavily dependent on the Greek civilization. Dinevelop lang nila ng konti. And then, Roman sculptors adapted Greek forms and techniques. So, lahat ng bullet na to, pinapalabas lang niya na yung early Roman period or yung mga Romans, yun, parang ginaya nila or inadapt lang nila yung mga ideas ng mga Greeks. Okay, so what are the characteristics of early Roman art? So, number one, it is practical and utilitarian. Okay? So, number two, interest in public works and engineering. So, yung mga Greeks kasi, yung mga early Greeks, they are more on like the artistic side, the aesthetic side. Pero, yung in terms of public works and engineering, yun nga, utilitarian and practical kasi yung mga Roman. Yun yung pagkakaiba naman nila. Kasi yung mga Greeks ay more on parang pagpapaganda, aiming for perfection, okay? Pero yung mga Romans, nakita nila yung side ng perfection and then ng aesthetics. Yun yung kinuha nila. Pero yung something na unique naman sa mga Romans is yung kanilang view on utilitarianism, practicality, public works, engineering. Yun naman yung hinalo nila doon sa aesthetics ng Greek, okay? So, sila ay concerned with the public good. So, makita natin yung mga early Romans talagang halos lahat ng colonies nila, ng naging teritoryo nila, pinagawan nila ng kalsada, nagtatayo sila ng mga bridges, nagtatayo sila ng mga public bathhouse para lahat ng tao ay makaligo. Gumagawa sila ng mga fountain para lahat ng tao ay makainom. So, ibig sabihin talagang they are aiming for public works, okay? And then engineering kasi they are creating massive infrastructure. Sobrang lalaki ng mga infrastructures nila noon. Next, emphasis on grand monuments of prominent people and architectural infrastructure. So, even though merong mga may mga in honor for their gods and goddesses, pero yung mga Romans, parang they are focusing on prominent people more, especially on their Caesars or on their rulers or their greatest generals. Yun yung parang ginagawa nila ng mga sobrang magagarbong sculptures, sobrang magagarbong bahay. Okay? Yung mga prominent people nila. Okay, next, technical advancement. So, nagkaroon sila ngayon ng advancements on technology. And then, everything else is colossal to show power. So, parang nangyari, mas malaki, mas powerful. Kaya, yung mga temples, in order to show the power of the gods, nilakihan nila. Yung love nila for for war and violence, yung Colosseum, nilakihan nila. So, bakit malalaki, colossal, ang lahat ng mga architectures ng mga Romans kasi nga they believe themselves to be powerful people. And what is the way to show power? To create colossal infrastructures. Kaya sobrang lalaki ng mga infrastructures nila noon. Okay, so what are the milestones in the early Roman art? So for Roman architecture, they used concrete in constructing buildings. Okay, so ito na yung madalas gumagamit sila ng mga concrete. Okay, so they preferred vaulting system of architecture. So ano yung madalas na ginagamit? Rounded arch, yung pa ganon, yung parang katulad dito. Ayan, yung mga yan, tawag dyan ay arch. Okay, so meron silang rounded arch, meron silang mga vaults, and may mga domes. So, sa kanila nang galing yan. So, pag meron kayong nakitang ganyang architecture sa Pilipinas, malamang nanggaling yan sa Roman architecture or inspired by Roman architecture. What about orders or columns? Kanina, sa Greek, meron tayong tatlo, which is yun nga, yung Doric, Ionic, and then yung Corinthian. So, meron tayo ngayon na Tuscan and then Composite. For Romans naman. So, ano yung itsura nila? So, two Roman orders, we have Tuscan, very plain design, with a plain shaft. Kamukha siya ng Doric, pero yung Doric kasi may mga parang stripes yon, may mga stripes or sometimes may ridges din siya. Pero itong Tuscan, plain lang talaga siya. Okay? So, with a plain shaft, a simple capital, meron siyang base, yun naman yung pinagkaiba niya sa Doric. Yung Doric ay walang base, diretso lang siya sa floor, and then a frieze. So, simplified adaptation of a Doric order. So, again, kamukha niya yung Doric order, pero mas plain lang siya. Okay, simplified siya. What about the composite? So, this one naman is parang ginaya-gayang version ng Ionic and then ng Corinthian. So, it's a mixed order. So, you are combining the volutes of the Ionic with the leaves of the Corinthian order. So, yung kanina, yung Ionic, yung merong ganyan, tapos yung Corinthian, yung may mga leaves, okay? Yung composite naman, yung composite order is you combine both the Ionic and the Corinthian. Kaya nga sabi ko sa inyo, manggagaya yung mga Romans, 'di ba? Even yung orders nila, binago lang nila ng konti tapos sinabi nila na kanilang order yon. Pero yun nga, yung composite ay pinaghalong Ionic and Corinthian. So, meron siyang yung spiral na ganyan, at the same time, meron siyang leaves. Tapos yung katawan niya, magkamukha na dun sa Ionic tsaka sa Corinthian. Ayan. So, ayan po. Ito yung Tuscan. So, ganyan lang siya. Meron siyang meron siyang base. Ito, meron siyang base. Ayan, makikita natin. Tapos, ito yung shaft niya. Sobrang plain lang. Tapos, yung capital niya, straight lang. Okay? So, ito naman yung example naman natin tawag nito, ng composite. So, merong base. Tapos, yung katawan niya, yung shaft niya, may mga ridges. Ayan, katulad ng Ionic tsaka ng Corinthian. And then, magkahalo yung capital niya, merong volute, tapos merong mga leaves ng Corinthian. Okay? So, ayan po yung dalawang column orders ng Romans. Again, Tuscan, and then the composite. So, ito yung natawag natin na arch. So, rounded arch. Ayan, makikita natin. So, ito yung tinatawag natin na vault. Yan. So, ito yung example natin ng vault. So, kadalasan yan, ginagamit sa entrance, sa mga entrance, at yung tinatawag natin na dome. Okay? So, ayan, example natin yun ng dome. So, ito ay mga madalas din gamitin ng mga Romans noong unang panahon. So, we have two types of Roman architecture. Hindi naman talaga siya two types. Examples lang siya. So, types of Roman architecture, lahat to malalaki. Kita nyo yung mga tao parang mga langgam. Ayan, sobrang lalaki. Kasi nga, they feel that in order to show their power, everything else has to be big, okay? Or colossal. So, you have the Colosseum. Kaya nga siya Colosseum kasi it's colossal. Dito naman ginagawa yung mga gladiator battles. So, pinapanood, may mga ticket yung mga Romans noon. Tapos, depende dun sa ticket na nabili nila, yung seating nila. So, minsan, may mga tao na dito na umuupo sa pinakataas. Okay, tapos nung unang panahon meron siyang retractable na umbrella. So, just imagine yung technology nila noon. Meron silang retractable na umbrella 'pag mainit, okay? So, puwedeng maglagay yung umbrella nila tumatakip dun sa Colosseum. Tapos kapagka okey naman yung panahon, so tatanggalin naman siyang gano'n, nare-retract siya, okay? So, you have the Colosseum.
para siyang theater, parang sine, pero ang pinapanood niyo ay live na patayan ng mga gladiators. Tapos ito naman yung Pantheon. So yung Pantheon naman nila is parang temple nila for their gods and goddesses. Okay? So we have the Baths of Diocletian. So makikita nyo, meron tayong mga vaults dito. Ito, itawag din natin sa mga to ay vaults. And then meron tayong mga rounded arch. Yan. Etong infrastructure na to ay tinayo nila nung Roman times pa. Okay, so Baths of Diocletian, ito ay public bathhouse. So, pwede kang pumunta dyan, tas parang may malaking swimming pool, tapos parang ligo ang bayan siya. So, parang swimming pool nga siya. Okay? So, makikita natin, public works. Kasi nga, parang gusto ng Roman government na makinabang lahat ng mga Romans. Okay? So, kaya gumagawa sila ng public bathhouse. So, we have also Arch of Titus. So, parang entrance naman siya. So, even the entrance, sobrang laki. Okay? Para magpakita ng power. And then we have, ang tawag natin dito ay Circus Maximus. Kung kapitbahay lang to actually ng ng Colosseum. Parang ito yung Colosseum, tapos ito yung Circus Maximus sa gilid. So magkatabi sila. So ito ay for Roman entertainment din. Kasi nga, public works. Gusto ng Roman government na mag-enjoy lahat ng nasasakupan nila. Kaya nagpo-provide sila ng entertainment. Kung yung Colosseum ay para sa live na battles ng gladiators, ito naman ay para sa chariot racing. Okay? So, ano naman siya, chariot racing naman siya. So, may pwedeng magpustahan yung mga tao, ganyan. So, parang parang sa kabayo din, parang ganon. Pero sa kanila, chariot racing. Okay, so ito na yung Circus Maximus ngayon. So, allegedly, ito yung itsura niya before, nung unang panahon. Pero ngayon, ito na yung itsura niya. Mga ruins na lang siya. So, ito yon. Ito yung mga, yung mga offices. So, ito na rin sila ngayon. Tapos, ito yung mismong lugar. So, yan na yung Circus Maximus ngayon. So, for their sculpture, ang pinagkaiba ng sculpture ng Greeks sa Romans is yung Greeks nga, dahil parang ini-aim nila na magmukhang perfect, okay, yung mga sculpture nila, wala silang mga imperfections. So, ibig sabihin, walang mga wrinkles, walang mga peklat, yung mga katawan ng mga babae, very perfect, so voluptuous, ibig sabihin, sexy, mahaba yung legs, yung mga lalaki, very macho, ganyan. Pero yung mga Romans, they aim to be as realistic as possible in a sense na kung may imperfections yung tao, talagang sinasama nila yon. Halimbawa, yung mga bust portrait nila, may wrinkles talaga. Kung yung tao may wrinkles, hindi nila tatanggalin yan. Talagang may wrinkles even the sculpture. Kung meron silang nunal, lalagyan nila ng nunal yung sculpture. Ganon yung ginagawa nila. Okay? So, makikita natin very intricate even the folds ng damit. Ayan. So, tunay na tunay pati folds ng damit. Hindi ko lang nasama yung isang sculpture ni Emperor Nero kasi si Emperor Nero ay medyo mataba. So, yung sculpture niya ay mataba din. Okay? So, ibig sabihin, talagang hindi pwede na na si Emperor Nero ay gusto ko macho ako dun sa sculpture, hindi pwede. Hindi pwedeng i-edit. Okay? So, talaga yung mga Romans noon, kung ano yung nakikita nila in reality, yun talaga yung nilalagay nila sa sculpture. Kahit na ituring nilang imperfection yon. Okay, so meron din silang tinatawag na mga historical reliefs. Pag sinabing reliefs, ito ay sculpture na naka-attached sa solid base. Ibig sabihin, hindi siya 3D, hindi siya yung pwede mong tignan harap-likod. So, halimbawa, ito yung yung base niya, nakaukit lang siya diyan. Kapag nag-ukit kayo sa perla, tapos yung perla ay naka-attach pa din, relief yung tawag doon. Yung mga carvings natin sa mga kahoy na upuan, relief 'yon, okay? So, ibig sabihin, pag tinignan mo yung likod, flat lang kasi yung base, naka-attach pa rin siya sa base. Naka-emboss lang siya. Relief yung tawag doon. So, ito yung example niyan, historical relief. So, ito may mga sculpture dyan, pero ito may base pa rin siya, naka-attach pa rin siya sa base. So, ayan. So, stone sculpture. So, what about mga painting? So, ayan, mga examples natin ng painting noong Roman period. Mga late Roman period na tong mga to. Okay, so meron tayong landscape painting. So, pinapakita yung lugar. Okay, so dalawa yung klase ng painting nila noon. Pinapakita yung lugar or yung scenery. You call that as landscape painting or triumphal painting. Or pinapakita yung pagtatagumpay ng isang prominent hero or prominent soldier ng Roman Empire. Okay? So the next lesson that we are going to have is about medieval period. Pero I'm going to cut our discussion here kasi medyo mahaba din yung medieval period. Okay? So let's see you on our next meeting.